Good morning and welcome to Time in the Word. I hope that your Monday is off to a good start and that it will be a great day. As we have the last few weeks, we're in the book of James again this morning. We're in chapter 3 and picking up where Dave left off on Friday. Today we'll be looking at chapter 3, verses 13 to 18. So if you want to take your Bibles and open up to James chapter 3, verses 13 to 18, that's where we'll be this morning. Our topic for today is living in the wisdom that God gives us. It's a comparison between earthly wisdom and heavenly wisdom. So let's get right to the text, shall we? Verse 13. Here's what James writes. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. Now you keep your Bibles open to that passage this morning. Let's take a look a little bit about what James is talking about here. These verses are all about wisdom, two different kinds of wisdom. Worldly wisdom, it's described as being from below. It does not come down from heaven, but is earthly. It's also talked about as being unspiritual and demonic. The results of it are envy and selfish ambition. And where you have those things, you find disorder and every evil practice. Those are the things that mark worldly wisdom. For there's a contrast, James makes, between worldly wisdom and heavenly wisdom. The wisdom that is from above, the wisdom that comes from heaven, was described much differently. It's pure, peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. It's the God-given wisdom that is markedly different from the wisdom that comes from the world. It produces the fruit of purity. It produces a peaceable spirit, which is gentle and accommodating, slow to anger. It's impartial, and it's not hypocritical. James wants his readers to know what this true wisdom is all about. And what he gives in this text is really more than is more of a description than it is a definition. He is describing wisdom as a humble submissiveness to God, which results in a life of goodness, purity, and peace toward other people. Let me show you, or share with you rather, a story that I think shows this kind of wisdom. From July 26th to August 7th of 1971, the eyes of millions of Americans were on the Apollo 15 moon mission. Now, some of you might remember when that happened. You may remember the astronauts David R. Scott and James B. Irwin, who landed on the moon and spent 18 of their 66 hours there outside the spacecraft. They covered over 17 miles of the moon's surface in a specialized vehicle that people called the moon buggy. Upon returning to Earth, astronaut James Irwin, a Christian, declared, "As I was returning, I realized that I am not a celebrity, but a servant. So I'm here as God's servant on planet Earth to share what I have experienced that others may know the glory of God." Now, I don't know that any of us will ever do the things that astronaut James B. Irwin did. But I think all of us can have that same spirit, that same mindset, that same wisdom. The spirit of a servant that displays wisdom from above, godly wisdom. Now, James goes on to describe or analyze three different aspects of wisdom. We want to start by looking at the nature of wisdom and look back at chapter 3, verse 13. In regard to the nature of wisdom, we first need to look at the impact of the question in 3:13. Who is wise and understanding among you? James is asking that question for those who do not care about true wisdom, but only want the status of being thought of as being wise. The question is a challenge, and James' answer will expose them for what they are. But for those who honestly aspire to be wise, the question is an invitation. James's answer will show the way to attain that kind of wisdom. James is saying, I'm about to tell you the nature of true wisdom. Treasure this. Let all of us, as we consider on this Monday morning godly wisdom, let us first examine our own hearts before reading beyond this question posed in 3:13. Do we really want to be wise? Because if we do, then we have to hear what James says next. We must understand James' answer about the requirement of true wisdom. Our actions must authenticate our words. Who claims to be wise? Let him show it by his good life. That phrase good life in our culture can mean a prosperous and pleasurable life, but that's not really what James is talking about. He's talking about a moral good life. In the Greek, the phrase used there indicates good conduct or good behavior. And James is saying, let him show it by his deeds. Genuine wisdom, like faith, is very practical. It shows up in how one lives his or her life. Literally, James says here, let him or her show this wisdom by good behavior, his deeds, all these done in the humility of wisdom. So wisdom then, true wisdom, godly wisdom, is not something that I merely possess in my head. If I am truly wise, it is something that I demonstrate in my conduct. And finally, James here talks about the personality of wisdom. The wise deeds that we do are done in humility. Humility is a character trait that I think underlies all the Christian behavior described throughout the book of James. This is the trait to cultivate if we are going to take seriously and deeply into our lives all the things that James is talking about and putting those things into practice. Notice too the descriptions of this godly wisdom. It is peace-loving. It is pure. It's considerate. It's submissive. It's full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. All of these things fill out a picture of humility put into action. That's the personality of godly wisdom. Actions done in a spirit of humility, a humble heart. I read an interesting story from the pages of American history about Samuel Morse that I think demonstrate this. Samuel Morse was born into a preacher's home in New England just 2 years after George Washington was elected the first president of the United States. After finishing his education at Yale, Morse went to England to hone his skill at painting. Upon his return to America, he was recognized as a gifted artist and was soon in demand. Morse's first wife died while he was away from home, painting in Washington, D.C. He did not receive the news until it was too late. In his heartbreak, he turned away from painting and began trying to develop a means of rapid communication over great distances. This eventually led to his discovery of the telegraph. Now, we know from the pages of our history books that Morse accomplished so many things. He had notable achievements throughout his life, fame and honors. But Morse wasn't proud or boastful. He wrote a letter to his second wife in which he said this: "The more I contemplate this great undertaking, the more I feel my own littleness, and the more I perceive the hand of God in it, and how God has assigned to various persons their duties. He being the great controller, all others his honored instruments. Hence our dependence, first of all on God, and then on each other. To be wise, let us also humbly depend on God. And may all of us live out what Jesus has called us to do. I think in the culture in which we're living, we're looking for godly wisdom. We're looking for men and women who are followers of Jesus, who will live that out, do the things that Jesus has called them to do in a humble way. So I pray that this week, you and I will be able to do that. That the people that God brings in our path will see a gentleness, a humbleness, they'll see a good conduct, and that we possess the wisdom that comes from God. Hey, I want to thank you for joining in Time in the Word this morning. Remind you that Chris will be back again on Wednesday. We hope that you have a great day. May you be blessed as you are a blessing to others, and we'll see you next time.